spent countless hours in the garage with your dad. Now investing in that old car and working on it with your son reminds you of him. And his legacy lives on. Fund your passion with a low-interest home equity line of credit from Bank of Blue Valley.
Oh, Will, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing, Scott?
Good. I try to, so people like click on it. So they're like, oh, what is that? But more importantly, your office looks phenomenal. I mean, you're moved in, it looks so professional. What's cooking?
Yep. Coming together. A lot of good things at Bank of Blue Valley right now. It's one of those times, and I think you probably see it in your industry where when there's some turmoil or quick volatility in markets, whatever the case may be. Lots of clients have questions, and it's in times of uncertainty. This is kind of the fun time to do our job and be out and make sure that we're talking to our customers and trying to give them some sound advice for the short term and the long term. I'm sure the same for you, my man.
Well, I mean, Bank of Blue Valley, a lot of times people think of it as a community bank. They don't realize the work that you do around the country. So you're working with industries from a micro and macro perspective that you can really answer those questions. And fun fact, twice I call her our boss, Beth, and then Lisa that you work with Bank of Blue Valley. And two people didn't know me, which my ego is hurt. They're like, hey, you're friends with Aaron and you do that show at Bank of Blue Valley. And obviously we have Burns McDonnell that's come on, and our guest is very close with Burns McDonnell that's hiring well over 2,500 people right now. So if people are looking, it's there. But I kind of found it really cool. I think like everything just takes time. And I just love the fact that people don't care who I am. They're like, hey, Bank of Blue Valley, Aaron Folk. And, Aaron's amazing. She's controlling everything right now. And she always gets nervous when she leaves us alone.
Well, as she should. She really should. I think that's why she's the brains, right?
So our guest that we're going to introduce, and as Aaron puts on the music that she doesn't like, but I really like, you can hear it. I think it's catchy. But this gentleman only needs a one-name introduction. He may be an owner of multiple businesses. Lisa's watching. But we're going to dive into his deep family history. Here is Nilson.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody.
Nilson, is your colors also like Bank of Blue Valley and Burns and Mac? Is it blue?
I think this is, no, it's not. It's a good color, but I think I may take a note from that going forward.
Yeah, so we're going to dive in. I'm going to ask the first question. It's a short one, but a long answer, and then Will's going to go. But, what's the origin story of your family's company? Because it starts maybe not in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's right. It's a fun story to tell. So my family, I was born in Brazil. All my immediate family was born in Brazil. You know how people say they're military brats? Well, I was an academia brat, right? So my dad was a college professor, and that took us to all different places as he, went and furthered his education and taught at different schools. So I culturally, ethnicity wise, I'm Brazilian, and was born in Northeast Brazil. And my dad had an opportunity. This would be, I think, the late 1980s to get his PhD at a school in Rolla, Missouri. It used to be called UMR. I think it's called S&T now, right? So as he was getting his PhD there, we never really had any intentions of staying in the United States. But 3 older sisters, I'm the youngest. Eldest sister fell in love with an American guy, and we decided to stay to keep the family together because she was pretty intent on staying. And so that was really the genesis of our family story. And Dad found himself in a position where he needed to support a family, and he's an engineer, very black or white guy, and found a company in Kansas City that would help us transition from what was a student visa to a working visa, which later became a green card and a citizenship. And that spanned a couple decades, and that's a whole nother conversation in regards to how that works. But he started IEC 27 years ago, and so now through a series of life events, I've come back and I've been running it for 7-8 years, in some capacity almost 10. And have really enjoyed it. And that's been our family story, kind of, both coming to the States and our foot into entrepreneurialism.
Got it. So, with your dad's background, teaching at Rolla or being at Rolla, I mean, did they even let you use a calculator? Was it all slide rule for you? Is that what you had to learn on?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that gene may have skipped. Hopefully my son has a better aptitude for that. Those guys are on a different level, but what it did, Will, is it kind of gave us a really good foundation of how we kind of view the world and see things just from a very disciplined way of looking at things.
Yeah, so shout out to Linda Endicott and WashU that recruited you. You've done on for higher education, so you do have that bone. But more for the audience, tell us a little bit about the origin story of the company and how it got off the ground, where it's gone, and then really the last 4 or 5 years, I feel like you've been on a really great growth trajectory.
Sure. So the company, in 96, when IEC started, and really our basement of our house in eastern Jackson County, at that time, the industrial market in Kansas City was a lot different than what it is today, right? So you had the Fairfax district, you had General Motors, Fairfax, Owens Corning, a lot of these big industrial markets. And we started as electrical contractors at that time. And then, like any other business, we evolve and we look at different markets and kind of see where we fit and compete more effectively. And we started doing that in more commercial spaces, commercial markets. And that then took us to an opportunity to do an electrical project at Whiteman Air Force Base, where we work as a subcontractor. My father at that time, was looking at it and he thought, hey, I think that this is a natural opportunity for us to get into the prime market. And that's what we did. And this must have been in the early 2000s at that time. And we started getting into the GC work for federal clients. And by proportion, Scott, that has really kind of taken over our overall business portfolio. And in the capacity as general contractors for federal clients, we operate, we have a contract at Whiteman Air Force Base. We've been at Fort Irwin in Barstow, California for the past 12 years, and then Charleston, South Carolina at Joint Base Charleston for the past 7 years, and then at Barksdale Air Force Base in Bossier City, Louisiana for the past 6 years. We do work for the Federal Aviation Administration and work without exaggeration from Alaska to Florida. Just doing a lot of redundancy power systems for them. It's really important that their stuff doesn't go down.
Yes.
So we work a lot.
You doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do that. And then I think most recently, and this is what you probably referenced, we started an engineering division, and that's in close partnership with a lot of really close allies here in Kansas City. And that engineering division, I like to call it a return to the start. If kind of coming back to my father's background and really how our business started. And that focuses on transmission and distribution engineering for investor-owned utilities. So there's a big need for designing substations and solving all the problems that are part of our grid, our electrical grid. And that's the market that we've been pushing really heavily into in 2022. And thankfully, gratefully, been seeing a lot of attention, a lot of good feedback from the market.
So
Will's going to ask one question, but without Aaron, we are so lost because we're always supposed to say, where are you tuning in from? And where are you watching? And so that's why we just can't. I mean, guys, we just can't do it without Aaron. But it's like Anchorman in the teleprompter. We will read it. So Will, go ahead. I know you got the next question.
Well, no. So I was going to ask you a question, and I think it's a very unique story. You personally, where you talk about your dad literally starting this firm in your basement. You've been close to it much of your life, I assume, when you came or when the firm started, but you didn't jump directly into the firm. You took some time outside of it to get to this point.
Right.
Maybe you could share a little bit of that story and how that's helped you in the position that you're in today.
Sure.
Great question, Will.
Yeah, sure. So we kind of have this unsaid family rule that you should kind of go off and cut your teeth somewhere else prior to trying to come back to family business for really a lot of reasons. So I did my undergrad at TCU in Fort Worth. and while I was there, I was really fortunate. I got a really neat internship with a Pfizer pharmaceutical company out of New York. So I worked in between Manhattan and Fort Worth really through all of my undergrad time. And then I had a job, which I was really grateful for because I was coming out right before the big subprime deal out in Santa Barbara, California. So, could be worse.
Yes. Yep.
So I worked out in Santa Barbara for a number of years for Pfizer, and then took a job with a company in the same space out of a Danish company called Novo Nordisk, and started just working in management, that kind of deal, and then had an opportunity to come back and do a lot of hospital negotiation. So a completely different business.
Yep.
In healthcare management, and operations. But I found myself on an airplane Monday through Thursday. And when I was in town, I was kind of fighting Southern California traffic because the Santa Barbara story only lasted a short stint, and moving to Los Angeles. And when I had the opportunity to come back to the Midwest, I think, Scott, you mentioned Linda, our mutual friend, Endicott, and had an opportunity to get my graduate degree at Washington University in St. Louis. And at that time, my wife and I, life had evolved, decided to make Kansas City our home. It was a return for me. It was new for her. She's from Los Angeles. Yeah. And that was kind of our story.
So when we're talking about Burns McDonnell, one of the sponsors of this show, how did you cultivate that relationship, and then what it is today? And how has that partnership helped both of your organizations grow throughout the country or maybe throughout the globe?
Sure. So Burns McDonnell, obviously being a huge company, I think the fact that they're in our backyard, we really forget how exceptionally large they are, and really being a multinational firm. So we started working with Burns McDonnell as electrical contractors. Really, the first competency that I referenced, and as they went out and looked, as they grow their portfolio and look for new clients and do those things that they do, we found really kind of a seat on the bus in partnership by helping them look at it as a trade partner. So when they're looking at a project, we could say, "Hey, have you thought of X? Maybe you don't need as much of Y," and then just built relationships just based on kind of providing some of that value. And as those relationships strengthened over the years, Scott, they have a very key part of their business that, to your point, not a lot of people realize how big it is, but it's in the transmission and distribution engineering space. So,
they call it the T&D.
The T&D, right? So, and what T&D means is transmission. If you think of those big power lines on metal things way out in the middle of the country, and then the distribution is like what we see in our neighborhoods. Right. But in between that transmission and between that distribution is a substation. And that substation will essentially take that power down or take it up to allow it to be distributed where it needs to go. And that's a really big part of the T&D market. And I'll let Burns kind of speak to what that T&D division represents on their end, but I can assure you it's significant. And it's only forecast to get more important and more necessary as we start plugging in our cars, and we start getting away from a lot of fossil fuels to heat our homes, and our current infrastructure is already aged. So let's pretend we weren't even going to transition to a more electric future. We would still need to be doing a significant amount of work in this sector. You take that and the fact that we are going to move away from fossil fuels, it's just a matter of how we do it at what cost, and you have a significant need. Burns is really smart, right? They didn't get that big without being really smart. And they quickly see that the overall amount of work out there and the amount of people that are qualified in order to do it, there's a big disparity. And so they found themselves in a position where they could kind of complain about it or try to architect or design, engineer a solution. And that's where our relationship kind of graduated to the next level. And in partnership with them, and people use that term partnership real loosely, right? But for us, it really does mean that we stand shoulder to shoulder, and we look at this market that is underrepresented, not only by qualified firms, but certainly by diverse firms. And I always say diverse means, it runs a pretty wide gamut. People from Brazil, it could mean somebody of a different sexual orientation. It could mean somebody, it can, gender, you name it. And it's important that those firms are represented in that conversation. And that's been part of what I've been, doing a lot of these kind of events for, is just to try to increase some of the awareness of that. So our partnership is approaching this market, and we lean on Burns's experience to help us get to that flywheel moving of having business in front of us as we build out our team. And it's been really great. So we've been working across the countries for utilities that, kind of power your businesses and your homes, and all the way up from the East Coast to the West Coast.
No, that's fantastic. And you're right. Your comment is spot on. Burns is a lot of smart people. They've done really well, and no one. We're very blessed in Kansas City to have firms like Burns and McDonnell. But you guys have a great reputation yourself. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the culture of your firm, and if some people are looking at this, inquiring or thinking about applying for positions with you, what should they know about IEC?
No, I appreciate that comment and really the question. So, we are obviously in that position where we're trying to grow our team, right? So, and we're trying to do it in really what I call a weird, different, atypical time. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to add engineers to our team so we can meet this market need. I think if you ask most of the people on our team, we have very much of a small company feel in a lot of ways, even though that we're spread out throughout the country, and we have a pretty big history of working in a lot of different places and for different clients. So I like to tell my people I'm busy, not important. So people can come in my office, we talk about things and you bounce things off, and I end my day kind of hanging out with my people. I kind of schedule that time to do that. So I think that intimacy just kind of builds that kind of, people aren't numbers. They really, we care about them. I'll share with you a story, just going back to talking about Dad. But I remember when I was probably in junior high, and Dad was, he taught me a lot of applicable life skills, how to do taxes, how to balance a checkbook, a lot of things that you think a PhD in engineering would teach, right? And one day he held out a spreadsheet, and at that time it showed all of our employees. And he asked me, he's like, hey, how many mortgages do you think that we're responsible for? And I'm like, well, shoot, just our house here in Eastern Jackson County. He's like, you're wrong. And he went down the list, and he kind of said, this guy just bought a house. This guy has a kid going to college next year. And he knew all those things down the line. And that really kind of left a lasting impression on me. And, now that I sit in the seat that I do, I look at it as, I need to kind of carry on that tradition of knowing who my employees are, knowing what they have going on, and doing my best so I can keep enough good opportunities in front of them for the present and to build their careers. Because I think that's what people are really looking for.
So you've done a lot of work in Martin City, which we'll touch on, but with Ozanan and Cornerstones of Care to start out with the work you do in the community, was there someone in particular that made an impact on you, like your father? And then also explain to the audience what Ozanan and Cornerstones of Care does.
Sure. Yeah, this is a great organization. I love talking about them. So our office here is in Martin City. Martin City, for everybody knows the brewery, right? And Martin City Brewery has been such a great ambassador of our little block. So it's a CID, which is called a Community Improvement District. But where our backyard ends, Ozanam's property begins. And so Ozanam is it was way back when called the Ozanam Home for Boys, but now it includes both boys and girls. But it's really for kids that don't fit into the traditional foster care system. So the orphanage system of what we kind of used to see in movies and things like that, it's really kind of a dead system. It doesn't really exist. So foster care has kind of replaced that, but not all kids can fit into a foster care system for a number of reasons. Some because of trauma, abuse, you name it. A lot of really kind of sad reasons, but there's really good people like at Ozanam that are trying to do things to help these kids. So, before COVID, it kind of seems like everything's either before or after COVID. They had an opportunity where you could go in on Tuesdays for about an hour and help them with homework. And it was really kind of cool because first 30 minutes you may work on your homework. And then the other 30 minutes is you just give them a positive interaction with an adult. and huge attitude adjustment, really touching, and so you had an opportunity to really have one-on-one time. I've served on different boards, but the level of a satisfaction that kind of gave us was really exceptional. And then, I invited our other people at IEC to do the same thing and allow them to do that, to make it work. And it's just drive around the block and you can get there. So I highly encourage anybody that, would be interested in taking a look at an organization and dedicate some time and talents to look at that.
Yeah. Fantastic organization. You're aligning yourself with some great people. So I would love to hear more about that too. So I'll take it boring though, and go back to some of the audience here and keep the comments coming in. But as we think about this market environment that we're in today, and we have so many younger entrepreneurs that watch this, and they don't often get access to someone in your position. So as you think about, the commodities, rates, trying to find labor and hire, what are some things that are on top of your mind, and any advice you could give to some entrepreneurs that are seeing this for the first time, or any business owners or managers that are going through this experience for the first time?
Everybody always says that we're in unprecedented times. And I think in a lot of ways we really are. And so we're starting to see like a lot of, commodity prices typically are, what would be like a leading indicator. And I think just recently I saw that lumber's, went to 1,600 per board feet, now 600 per board feet. So you have these volatility swings that I think are just, a lot of people are trying to make sense of what's going on. To me, that's not as concerning as what's kind of going on in the labor market. Mm-hmm. Commodity, a lot of times, I mean, if a company can price these things, and they'll pass on the commodity swings to different people through different strategies of holding bids only for 5, 10, 30 days, as opposed to holding it for longer periods of time. The people that are essentially how our labor force is engaging with potential employers is something that I think has changed a lot from COVID to present. And I think it's still, we still haven't fully seen the effects of that. And I think as, regardless of what kind of socioeconomic class you're in, there's a lot of liquidity in the market right now.
Yep.
And I think that I'm not sure at what rate and how people will start re-engaging with employers, but I think that pendulum is probably going to swing back to more of a mid-ground. The optimistic side of me says that, maybe some employers will have taken away some best practices of, hey, what's important to folks? Mm-hmm. And also some employees will be able to say, hey, look, eventually I have to maybe do some things that I don't necessarily want to do all the time. And maybe we'll find a nice hybrid of the two. But I do think that, it's never good when one side overplays their hand, right? In any kind of negotiation. And the relationship really needs to be amicable on both sides. And I would say for anybody that's, that has dreams of entrepreneurship, it's just understanding what the rules that you're playing by. And these are constantly being changed.
Yep.
I don't know if it's necessarily good advice that I'm kind of giving out, but it's just some of the things that I'm looking at in regards to where I kind of see the market. I saw way back when, like, hey, look, as inflation comes up, that kind of seems to be the big thing right now.
Yep.
When everybody was talking about inflationary pressures, I'm like, hey, this is going to be something that we're talking about now, but the full effects aren't going to be felt on for another 16, 18, 24 months. And I still think that we are going to see some businesses that can't come out the other side due to some of these inflationary pressures.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Especially if you have bonuses that are budgeted or pay increases, it's not even sometimes keeping up with inflation, and we're all dealing with that. So we have a 2-minute question. Question that I have is the work that you've done with the Hispanic Chamber, Aaron Folk, and you have been on the board. So if you could talk a little bit about that. And then I know Will has a question on a project that both your organizations worked on together. So if you could talk a little bit about your work with the Hispanic Chamber, and especially, the strides that it has made recently.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks for that question. It's, Hispanic Chamber has been something that, our business and our family has supported now for really 2 generations. My dad served on the board. I served on the board, actually with Aaron, which is great. And it's an organization that, it really tries to represent a part of our community that's just growing in regards to Hispanic-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses. And I really like the perspective of what Carlos Gomez is doing there, because he's a really inclusive guy.
Rock star.
Right. And by being able, framing that conversation to say that, reaching out to the other minority groups and getting people talking about different ways that we can start including more people is really kind of the thing I think really sets Carlos apart. And it's been a really big part of our business identity. And we can look back to a lot of the opportunities we had. So your question earlier about how the relationship with Burns and Mac started, I'm pretty sure Carlos was involved somewhere with some introduction, right? And that's a really big part of being in those groups is you lean on other people's networks, and you certainly have the opportunity to nurture those new relationships. But if you trace it back long enough, you'll kind of find some common denominators.
And all because you were serving the community. That is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Will, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you didn't. I think it's fascinating. That's a great story. And then you spent time at WonderScope and had involvement, something very close and near to Bank of Blue Valley. And our founder, Bob Rainier, maybe just a couple minutes on WonderScope for those that don't know much about it.
Yeah. So big kudos to Bank of Blue Valley for that. You guys were really instrumental in letting us build our new building there. So for those people that don't know, WonderScope is a STEAM museum: science, tech, engineering, art, and math. The Rainier family, which is a family for those people that don't know, are behind the scenes, one of just a really philanthropic, great family in Kansas City. And they were letting us use an old elementary school in Shawnee Mission. And we had a really ambitious undertaking to build a new building in Redbridge in South KC, move it from Kansas to Missouri. So a really big capital campaign. It probably put a lot of white hairs on everybody's head, myself included. But we raised the money. Bank of Blue Valley came through and helped secure the financing. And we built this a really cool icon and asset in southern Kansas City, Missouri. That's been doing great. And I have since rolled off that board, but IEC was a trade partner on that building to build it. And it's been really cool to drive by or have my kids go in the summertime and just appreciate that. And every once in a while I'll overhear somebody saying how much fun they had at that museum. It's just a feel good moment there.
So the gray hairs and the hair you lost, I think I lost the hair for you, and then Will got the gray hair. Team effort.
Yeah.
And then last question as we get out for audience, you do a lot of work with Martin Sidney Economic Development. But instead of talking about that, if you are going down the street and you're starting at RC's, you have to name one dish at the restaurants. It's going to be short to do in a minute, but what is the dish you like at any of the restaurants? You don't need to name all of them, but just go.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go right across the street to Martin City to the pub side. And they have a really spicy chicken sandwich that is really hard to beat. It's understated, and you got to get it with tots. And if you have a little pocket, you can put some tots in there for later.
Sounds like a winner.
Yeah.
Winner.
That is exactly the answer you want. It's like the stuff that's not on the menu. But if you're like Will and Nilson and I, and you grew up in the 2000s a little bit, you had these things called cargo shorts, Gen Z. And so we'd like to thank our sponsor, Burns McDonnell, for the amazing partnership they have with Nilson's company. And then at Bank of Blue Valley that you guys partnered on WonderScope. And thankfully we survived without Aaron. So we're going to wave at the camera and say bye.
Yeah, thanks for having me.